As we've been talking about, President Trump addressed the United Nations General Assembly today as the world body gathered to mark the 80th anniversary of its founding. And in a speech that went on for nearly an hour, the president covered a lot of ground. Join me now to unpack the president's address is our esteemed panel for today. Dr. A.J. Nolte, a professor at Regent University School of Government and the director of Regent's Institute for Israel Studies, and Dr. Cal Beisner, founder and president and national spokesman for the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. Dr. Nolte, Dr. Beisner, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Thank you very much.
So President Trump had run-ins with broken equipment at the United Nations, escalator, teleprompter. Those seem to underscore deeper complaints about the efficiency of the United Nations. Now, President Trump criticized the UN as basically being irrelevant, and it's because it's failed in its mission to ensure global security and stability. Here's one clip of what he had to say.
The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war.
Dr. Nolte, your response.
Yeah, so when you look at the foundation of the UN, there's kind of 3 or 4 purposes. The first is to prevent World War III, right? And so the Security Council infrastructure is designed to prevent another global war. And it whether it actually succeeded at that or was lucky in the fact that the Cold War never turned hot, that goal was accomplished for a very long time. Then there's also, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there's this idea of the UN promoting human rights. But the problem with that is that from the beginning, the Soviet Union, which is one of the worst human rights abusers of the 20th centuries, was on the Security Council and had a veto on pretty much anything. And subsequent to that, the People's Republic of China, which was admitted in the 70s, also has a veto and also has a horrendous record on human rights. So that was never going to be achievable. And then, of course, finally, there's the sort of peacekeeping and international development mission. And there you have a situation where there were a lot of high, lofty ideals and no mechanisms for actually achieving that.
Right.
And so I think the president's basically right. It has largely failed to accomplish most of these lofty purposes. The one thing that it could potentially claim credit for, and I think there's other factors as well, is that the Cold War never turned hot.
Well, just one aspect I think illustrates the president's comments about writing nice letters but not doing anything is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which almost, I think, all but maybe one member state has signed on to, but yet does not abide by, and the UN does absolutely nothing.
UDHR was written largely by Dr. Charles Malik, who was a Christian statesman, actually gave a very famous address at Wheaton College back in the 1980s about Christian statesmanship. And there's a lot of good in it, and a lot of people have signed on to it on paper. But again, there's no mechanism for enforcement. And even when it was signed on to, you had the USSR playing a charter role in the UN, and the USSR, Stalin was in charge. So they're routinely violating UDHR even as they signed it. So it's a lofty ideal, but again, the UN's never had the capacity or really even the desire to enforce that.
Moving on to another topic, President Trump also criticized Europe for their use of Russian oil as the war between Russia and Ukraine continues, which basically is funding that war. Play that clip.
China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products.
Cal, he talked a lot about returning to fossil fuels, getting rid of this green scam, and he was pretty critical about where Europe had gone when it came to the green energy deal.
Yes, he was, and I think he was dead right on that. I mean, Europe has seen skyrocketing energy prices as it's tried to replace extremely energy-dense, power-dense hydrocarbon fuels, that's fossil, coal, oil, natural gas, with wind and solar. which are very low density energy sources. And of course, when you're trying to go from low density to the extremely high densities that we actually need to power our electrical devices, to move our vehicles down the road and so on, the more you have to go from low density to high density, the more it's going to cost. So that's why Europe has been struggling so much. You've seen manufacturing move out of Europe into other countries. And at the same time, we've kept manufacturing here in the United States. Some people think that we've lost a lot. As a matter of fact, our manufacturing totals have remained very high. We haven't lost anything significant. And that's part of why the U.S. is doing so well. And frankly, he's got really, really good people working with him. Lee Zeldin at EPA, Doug Burgum at Interior, and Chris Wright at Energy Department. These are men who really know their fields. They understand this stuff, and that's unusual for cabinet members. It's really nice to see people who really understand the matters of energy and climate.
Well, along those lines, in his speech, President Trump dismissed the threat of climate change. He pointed to predictions made over the years that turned out to be wrong, and he said they were made for bad reasons. I want to play that clip of him saying that.
It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. Climate change, no matter what happens, you're involved in that. No more global warming, no more global cooling, all of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong.
I mean, he's laying it all bare. I mean, everything they've been holding on to grab power, he's just pulling back the curtain on it.
Yeah, and of course, as a president is wont to do, especially this president, is talking in broad generalities and fairly simplified terms. And yes, there's been a lot of skullduggery behind the global warming, climate change alarmist movement. There's been some decent science as well, but the really important thing is to recognize that while human contribution to climate change is real, it is not catastrophic. The benefits that we get from the energy we take from fossil fuels far outweigh any of the harms that come from the warming. And the added benefits to all plant growth, especially to crop yields, from the added carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, also far outweigh the risks from climate change. Even the UN itself, in its 2018 special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees, said that basically if we did nothing to slow global warming, it would only reduce global gross domestic or gross world product per capita. That's, the value of everything that somebody produces in a lifetime or in a year. It would only reduce that by 2.6%, meaning that instead of people making 9.1 times more per year than they would in 2018, instead they're going to be making 8.8 times as much per year as they did in 2018. And so what that tells us is that global warming is certainly not a significant threat to humanity. People are going to be roughly 9 times better off in 2100.
Well, I mean, I think you just look at the economy. Look at the economy of China that has been putting coal-powered plants online every week. Their economy is continuing to grow. Their base is very energy dependent, and they have cheap energy, and that's what you need to do manufacturing and to grow an economy. I mean, I think it didn't come up in today's speech by the president, but I think he understands that. He's got to get America's energy base moving again if we want to continue to grow our economy and our GDP. Dr. Nolte, I want to bring you back in here on the topic of Israel and Hamas. Now, again, I have to commend the president. He did not hold back on anything today. He framed the growing momentum for a two-state solution at the United Nations General Assembly as a reward for Hamas. Play that clip.
We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th.
I mean, how can you not see that? I mean, he is absolutely right. How can you see it any other way?
I think the only way you can see it any other way is deliberately not looking at it. So we just did a podcast on this through the Israel Institute and our Israel Institute podcast, and I'll summarize it very briefly. Recognizing a Palestinian state here now today in September 2025, you're recognizing something that doesn't exist, that doesn't have any governance capacity, where no Palestinian leadership has any legitimacy from the population they've actually governed, and no Palestinian entity has any ability to provide peace, order, and security over areas they have controlled thus far. So that's called a failed state by any metric. So you'd be recognizing a failed state and also be empowering Hamas, because the dispute in Palestinian politics is, do we pursue a negotiated peace or do we use violence to try to achieve our ends? And so the Europeans and the Canadians and the Australians are essentially rewarding the pursuit of violence by recognizing a Palestinian state in this specific context, and also without demanding anything from Hamas in return for that recognition. So it's unconditional recognition. Whatever they can say, the conditions are supposed to happen after the fact. And so it's absurd. And I think it can only come from this. These are mostly leftist governments. It can only come from this idea that simply by speaking, we can incept a reality into being that does not exist. That's the only way that you can convince yourself that this is a good idea. And unfortunately, that's just not how the world works.
I was talking earlier in the program about the migration, the shift of population, and the fact that we see a number of, these European countries are being overrun by Islamic populations. That has to factor into the fact that you have the Prime Minister of the UK, Starmer, dropping the conditions previously that he stated in July, that they would have to release all the hostages, disarm, and not be a part of any government going forward. Those conditions were not on there this time around on Sunday when he announced that they would support a Palestinian state.
I think there's some of that. I think that there's part of the coalition. Most of these left-wing parties are being supported by Islamic groups, but also I think that's letting them off too easily, frankly, because those left-wing parties are also the open borders parties, and so it's not like the Muslims are going to turn around and vote for the opposition that wants to shut off immigration. So they don't have anywhere else to go. I think that's part of it, but it's also just the sheer insanity of recognizing a failed state to try to punish Israel because you think that somehow by recognizing it, you can create a reality that doesn't exist.
So a final question I was throwing out for both of you. When you look at the wide-ranging topics that the president addressed, I mean, he hit on pretty much every hot-button issue. And then he kind of wrapped up by saying, follow our lead. Get rid of the green energy. Go back to producing real energy, and stop the migration, close your borders, and take pride in who you are. I mean, pretty strong message. I wonder how that will resonate with the member countries. I'll start with you, Cal.
Well, I think certainly the European countries are going to have to be learning lessons out of this. I mean, they're suffering the results of their essentially open borders policies, bringing on high rates of crime and just a failure of immigrants to assimilate into their cultures. You can't keep a country going well long that way. I think they have a lot to learn from President Trump on this and from the policies that are now working in the United States. And yeah. I think that he was right to say.
Dr. Nolte, give you the final word.
I think countries that have retained a sense of sort of self-confidence and national identity and desire for independence will receive it well. I think that countries that are struggling with those issues will not receive it well. And so it'll kind of end up being a Rorschach test of that will say less about Trump and more about actually where everyone else is, as Trump's comments so often are.
So there'll be about a dozen countries that'll be like what he had to say. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today. Great to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.